7 in 3, 2, 1. We think the normal fit-in removes individual biases to keep into the status quo because that seems to be a safer option in many instances and governance support from people that are external to individuals for them to like put themselves into like a more stable career or into culture, eventually leading to making individuals happier. That is what we're incredibly proud to propose. Before moving on to the actual slides, a couple setups, particularly regarding on what narrative we are talking about. Firstly, we think this narrative looks like the one which is like, for example, spread by media, spread by the parents, and spread by the people in the society to advise to individuals that it's safer, it's more probable to lead to success, to order yourself into the mainstream culture or mainstream career. To encourage the people in the society because that leads to higher probability of success of individual at the end. I mean, this looks like, for example, mainstream media focusing documentaries on like how mainstream like white collar workers work hard in the job rather than like startup like the CEO or like Banun who go on their own way. Or individualistically, it looks like, for example, parents like endorsing the children to go to a 4-year university rather than other paths. We think this narrative is unlikely to be infinitely powerful, that it's going to find every single choice of individuals, for the reason that there are a lot of other competing narratives in the society that, like, for example, encourage startup culture, for example, to encourage people to make changes, for the reason that the society or the people in power also need changes, they also need innovation, in order for the society to function. That is why this narrative is it's not likely to force everyone to comply with one single standard, but rather likely to depict it as a more probable way to secure individual happiness and to fit in. That is what we project this narrative going to be. Moving on to substantive material. Why is it likely to lead to materialistic success of individuals, and why is it even closer together? Under the status quo with the absence of this narrative, we think there are two reasons why individuals that we target are likely not to assimilate with that mainstream culture and career path. Even if in the long run, it's probably the best way to achieve individual happiness. Firstly, humans innately have biases to keep their status quo because that's what they know how to do. That's what makes them comfortable. For example, if you live in countryside, for example, it takes you a lot of courage and like determination to make decisions to move to different countries or different cities. And we think it is natural human bias that everyone possesses. Secondly, we think the people who have biggest delta in this debate are the people who have like strong such biases to lean towards a status quo rather than making changes. For the reason that otherwise they're either way going to like make changes. Secondly, how does the society look like on that? How does it look like on social level? And we think on their side of the house, with the absence of narrative, and that their choice to like fit in or choice to pursue mainstream career are going to be seen as individual choice, a completely individual choice that no other people like need to help. That looks like, for example, minorities like who are trying to fit in are like seen as people who are struggling with their own problem, and it is often deemed to be selfish to ask for someone external for help because it's a personal problem that you wish to pursue mainstream career, which we aim to change on our side of the house. So what does it look like on our side of the house? Thirdly, on individual level, we think individuals are likely to interpret the narrative as something that makes their life more probable to succeed or more probable to like dodge the consequences that they want to most avoid and change their action in accordance with the narrative, for the reason that an average person without much confidence, without much skill, without much like a lot of anxiety about the future, wishes to choose safer options as opposed to like going adventures, right? And that is why this narrative functions as a tipping point for individuals to opt for conventional lifestyle. Secondly, on social level, I will take it up. We think scholarship or things like online articles on like know-hows about how to like pursue mainstream career are much more likely to spread on our side of the house. For that, not just because there's going to be much more demand on our side, but also it's going to be seen as something more virtuous society. That is why the corporations and the rich have more like incentive to provide, for example, scholarship to the people who wish to go to four-year university on our side of the house. Before moving on to importance, I take you.
So can you give me a picture without this narrative? How many people will be dropping out from university?
I don't necessarily think like a lot of people who enter university at the age of like 18, 20 will drop out, but we believe that the people who doesn't choose to go to university will significantly increase on our side of the house for the reason that like it looks safer to stay in your like, for example, region as opposed to making something new. The importance of this argument is twofold. Firstly, the probability that individuals are going to socially succeed are going to be like not rejected by the majority, going to be like capitalistically succeed is a very high on our side of the house. For the reason that it's very tough for individuals without much resource and average individuals to go against big corporations or go against power and yeah. Secondly, we think this even has societal impacts because the natural consequence of our argument is that the people from more backgrounds, people who needed scholarship to go to university, the women, the minority, have much more potential of like becoming CEOs, coming into position power within 20 or 30 years, which is going to be a role model for the new generation to come up from the difficulties they are facing. That is what we're incredibly proud of.
The moment when you're expected to fit in the majority of people, and the moment when you are blamed for not being able to fit in the majority of people, we think that's the moment where minorities are hurt the most. Few points of contextualization. Firstly, what does it look like? It looks like, for example, expect you to stay on the safe way. For example, for you to stay on the track to become, for example, an engineer that actually makes more money. But it also looks like other ways, right? It's not only limited to like in terms of career, but also in terms of, for example, acting in a way that fit in the cultural majority and the mainstream of what this looks like. For example, it looks like expecting my immigrants to fit in what in the society is the most likely to be what that kind of culture. But second point of contextualization. The government side fails to explain what the absence of this narrative looks like. But on our side, we tell you that the absence of this narrative means that the people on our side still have the incentive because probably they're just more money. For example, this is just their interest to become the CEO for them to go to universities, right? So we think it's unlikely that on their side they can claim any of the impact of how people will skip out of universities to do something else just because, like for example, their incentive of being safer, having more money. We think these incentives still exist on our side. The difference is on our side you don't add additional reason and the expectation from society and yourself internally to expect you to do something that others are doing. It looks like because everyone in your class is choosing to study in a medical school, so that is why you're studying in a medical school, right? So we think this looks like a perspective from society to expect you to fit in and to do what others do. We think there are two arguments in today's debate. Firstly, in terms of what this impact is on a career, and secondly, how this looks like when a minority has to fit in a culture, right? But we think firstly, how this leads to that's likely for you to be able to adapt to changes on our subhouse. We think that in terms of career, safer choices does not mean that in future is definitely going to be safer. Right? We think there are really lots of reasons that explain this. For example, in industries such as lawyer industry, there are going to be too many lawyers in the future. Or for example, having companies moving overseas, or for example, having AI rising and having you being replaced by robots. We think there are lots of other additional concerns that you may have, but just because of this norm, you are not likely to think of these kind of doubts. We think that this inherently is bad because it not allows you to have this doubt of what the norm is like and to not concede to the norm without thinking about why you really want and what is the possible future of this career just because everyone chooses it, right? But the second impact is how this leads to worsen as a whole, right? We think this comes in a few ways. For example, you don't expect people to start their own company. So for example, you don't likely to get the support from the government because the state can simply tell you, you should be the one working in Google, you should be working at Apple. Why are you starting your own company in the first place? Why are you inventing your own phone when there's iPhone existing in the first place? I think that means you're less likely to get funding and support. It means on their side house, what they want as scholarship is not likely to exist because the moment you want to study something that is unconventional, you're not likely to get that scholarship because people tell you that you should be fitting in what everyone else is doing. Secondly, the impact of this is you are not likely to get those kind of innovation in terms of technology or in terms of other ways, right? It means that this leads to bigger companies able to manipulate the whole market and leading not that much of innovation and that much able to happen. But thirdly, it means that on their house, what they support is this idea about safety. The moment that you don't progress, it is a moment that you don't. The moment that you are only staying in your comfort zone is when you are not able to progress, and that as a whole, in terms of individual and society, we think that is part. But the second part of our argument is just not caught on their side because they just limited the motion down to in terms of career. But we think this also relates to how minorities are able to fit in the culture of the majority of people, right? It means that on our side house, it's more likely that society are willing to accommodate to the culture of minority and how this leads to the protection of minority. We think this comes in a few ways. For example, how Muslims are working in France and how they're expecting to behave the same way as French do. It means not having those religious behavior. It means dressing in the way that others do. It means not having worship, right? It means that on their house, you have to look the same as what others, majority of people do. And that's a safe way for you to stay in this office and not get discriminated and not get the hate speech that you have from the public. I think on our house, fitting in means that you don't act in the way that you do, right? We think on our house, they say that this is selfish. We think this is just not selfish, right? Because that's your own culture that you should be doing. On our house, it's more likely that you have worship room. It's more likely that you are able to work hard. It's more likely that you can live in a way that you are comfortable with. For example, Chinatown, and not to feel ashamed because you're staying in somewhere different from someone else. I'll take opening.
Regardless of whether a norm is strong in the society or not, probably racist sectors will unfortunately exist and will continue to oppress one under your side of the house.
It is true that discrimination will exist, but it's only on our side that discrimination can be solved, right? Because on their side of the house, they're just trying to ignore the discrimination, but by acting that it doesn't exist, by not doing anything that you could have lead to any kind of discrimination. For example, not having worship so that people don't discriminate you, so that your office don't kick you out of the office. On our house, what we propose is collectively as a whole, when these immigrants are asking a company to actually build a worship room for them, or for example, allow them to wear what they really want to wear. That's what on our house, the only way exclusively for us to solve this kind of discrimination. The difference that we are willing on our house and more likely that we are able to protect these kind of differences. For example, you have the incentive for a company to just cater towards the demands of immigrants. Secondly, it just means that you are able to know what these immigrants want so that you're more willing to cater towards them, because you just want them to work in this company and not like go back to their countries, right? It means that on our house is more likely to have this kind of affirmative action towards minority in universities and having quota for them because they are not the ones who are weird. They are not the ones who have to fit in because we expect them to fit in. This also means that policies for states that supports minority the most. This looks like the most vulnerable people who cannot fit in a society being expected to fit in because you have a Chinese accent, because you just look in a way that is different from someone else. They are the ones who are harmed the most on their side of the house. For all these reasons, so proud to propose.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Two things. Firstly, responses to the opening opposition. Secondly, adding my material for explaining why these narratives are likely to be accepted actually by the most underprivileged people we like to study. first is several responses. I have 4 independent things to talk about. Firstly, about discrimination, which the leader of opposition suggested. I think discrimination is. I agree that discrimination is a very important issue, but I think they never mechanized how the solvency of discrimination in their side of the house in the first place. Obviously, I like to show like why it is very difficult to achieve that amount of drastic change in their side of the house. Obviously, like it's very difficult because like for example, implementing, for example, new systems or new laws require massive political capital, social capital. You need to have more social engagement for the movement. I think it is very difficult to achieve that amount of change in a very short extent. What we like to tell you, as my partner also told you, I think the most important thing is to protect the most vulnerable individuals in the current situation. I think this is the most proximate issue in this debate, because I think like when we wait until the discrimination to be solved, I think it'll take like massive years, like 10 or 20, like 30 or 40 years. I think these people are gonna suffer on discrimination by not following the majoritarian route, which is likely to achieve success. However, I think by having more fitting ins, I think, for example, like pursuing more stable careers or like assimilating to the majority culture, I think there's a huge probability of these people gaining success, because obviously these ways are preferred in the society. I think it is likely that these people are that these people can gain, for example, like stable income or being able to work well in their workplaces or whatever. I think these benefits are more important to save the people actually suffering on the ground. Secondly, talking about the innovations or whatever, I think they talked about there may be like decrease in the funding for startups or whatever. I think this is not likely for several reasons. Like personally, I think innovation is gonna anyway happen in their side, in either side of the house. As my partner clarified, like we're not saying that we're gonna completely ban those other career paths or whatever. I think people who are motivated and people who are privileged enough to pursue those societal changes or like technical innovations will anyway pursue for that even in our side of the house. Therefore, I think talking about the innovations and such, that it's not exclusive in this debate. Third thing to talk about is the POI raised by the opening opposition. I think they're kind of concerned about the dropout from the universities or whatever. I think this is far less likely and at least far better in our side of the house for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think dropout will be less likely in our side of the house, because since people will be more willing to opt in and succeed in university, I think obviously there will be more demand from the people to seek the way how to, for example, get good grades in the university or whatever. I think this is the point where more information comes in even to the most underprivileged people, and become possible for them to pursue that particular career in the first place. Secondly, I think at least it is far better than not going, for example, not going to university or whatever. When talking about the stable careers and so forth, because obviously, like if they try to pursue their own career, it's likely that they cannot achieve it. As my partner explained, I think people regardless of their backgrounds, they try to hesitate. They hesitate to change their way of living. I think when they try to follow that way, especially for the societal minorities, it is likely that they will continue to be discriminated, continue to be marginalized in society. I think it's far worse than Actually, I think it is actually at least better to kind of try to go to university, even if they might drop out or if they might not get a good grade. Obviously, I think the knowledges you get in the university will be evaluated in some workplaces. I think that enables you to pursue a better career overall. Third thing that I like to talk about is like they saying that the stable careers are not always good and so forth. I think this is not true, because obviously stable means stable. I think stable careers are very important for especially underprivileged people, because I think these people are especially volatile to the economic for the changes in economic situation and so forth. I think having a stable job is very important so that they can sustain a living in the long run. Therefore, I think pursuing those stable jobs and assimilating to the majority culture is very important in solving these things. Next, moving on to our extensions. Like how is this norm spread, and how will be this accepted by by many people. As my partner told you, like there'll be like more TV programs or social media focusing on this, like influencers or people from minority. I think there'll be more influencers or people from minority backgrounds explaining how to fit in or like why is it beneficial to do so. I think there'll be more amount. This leads to more amount of information to spread about it. I think there'll be more options for adopting to the majority culture. There'll be more like options showed by the people. There'll be cheaper books to get about the know-how to get into a traditional company. There will be more information spread inside the community on like how to achieve in success in that society. I think what the reason why this is likely to be accepted by the most, even for the most underprivileged people, is that if like for example, like if the books or if the influencers are saying very like are aiming for like very impossible goals and saying very like unrealistic things, I think obviously these people will not be supported by the general public. I think it contradicts with the interest of these people. I think this is the specific reason why it is not likely to do so. But the second reason I like to mention here is that I think since there's the more minority people or the more underprivileged people entering into that particular like new career path or like that particular career path or like trying to like achieve that kind of way of living, I think there will be more. There's more the increase of demand, increase of the diversity of the people who get into that particular field will lead to like reaching better solutions or like having more know-how shared within the community. Therefore, like people more openly talking about like pursuing that traditional career path. Yeah, I think due to that, I think the sharing of the information within the community will enable you to like enable the most vulnerable people to be helped in our side of the house. I think so. Two ways. Firstly, I think at least I think we proved the most proximate impact in space, which is far larger than which is more important, which the opening option only brought very speculative impacts, which may or may not be achieved in the first place. The second way is that today is my birthday. If you want to congratulate my birthday, please give us vote. Thank you.
I will address mainly three things. One, what's the chance of success comparison on both sides? Two, justice. Three, how do we change the structure of society to make more reformations? First of all, I want to point out that government side has never really gave us real reason for supporting this motion. Because if it was true, as they have said, that going to university is the safest career choice, most of people will already choose that, in despite of not having this narrative. When I asked the POI, how many people are going to drop out without this narrative? That's exactly the point. They missed the chance to respond to that. Most of people will still stay. Most of people still going to stay with their parents. Most people will be influenced by their parents and their peers. Most of the people are still going to choose a 9-to-5 job because it is exactly the safe options. What we are trying to protect is those learners who think different, who want to start their own business, they need the support of government to fund their small business. Those are the people we are trying to protect. They take that away from us. A problem of their side of the house, they just assume that this is a one-size-fits-all solution is the best for society. They never give us the reasons why those people who have unique ideas don't deserve to be supported. They simply just brush aside and say, you will never succeed. But when Microsoft was working from the bottom and in the garage, they didn't think that they're gonna become the way they did. But the reason why it was able to become the day was because they were allowed to be revolutionaries. Yes, we agree that they may not necessarily work out. We are not saying they will always work out, but we are supporting it's a chance for them to have that opportunity. It will only be possible on our side because we support this affirmative action to allow minorities the chance to have quotas in parliament. We allow, for example, labor union to be formed on the basis of race. We allow, for example, Me Too movement to happen when you have more and more people coming out and say, enough is enough. When we have complaints in the HR say, this boss is abusing me at work. A lot of people are unhappy, but very few people are able to stand up. On their side of the house, those few people who stand up will be cracked down. On our side, when we have strength in number, more and more people standing up, it becomes very difficult for the boss to ignore those complaints. What we also would like to say is, their response was really dismissive. They just simply say, discrimination happened on both sides of the house. No, it doesn't. It is entirely not symmetric.
because under your side of the house, you're creating a norm. You're not fitting in, it's a you problem. Other people fit in. Look, I talked to the secretary. The secretary was all nice and approachable, and she smiled at me. And when I talked to Lily, Lily gave me a shit face. So Lily, you are the problem. Most of other people are fine, and you choose to not cooperate. So you become the target. You will be the next one to be fired. But on the outside, when we have more of these people, it becomes difficult for government to for the company to simply fire everybody, right? The previous speaker said, we don't have social capital. We cannot do anything. We cannot change the society and the structure. But the problem is, you are perpetuating the system in such a way it becomes harder to challenge it in the future. We at least have some form of revolutionary. We have some form of resistance. Where some labor union they are being formed and some social movement they are supported, and they are not being crushed from the very beginning because people don't believe in that or people think they shouldn't be standing out in the first place. It's so much more likely that we're able to have some form of change. And they can't just say those changes are insignificant unless they can say those changes create more harm. We should still celebrate those small changes. So the conclusion was the first clash about the chance of success is A. Really, we don't know, but we think that it's worth having that choice to allow people to try. And even if they try and fail, at least they don't have regret. There are so many Asian kids, they grow up to resent their job, say, I am a successful lawyer, I make shit ton of money, but I hate my life, and I hate my mom, because my mom made me the way I am. That kind of irreversible damage is what exactly outside is able to avoid. Even in the worst case scenario where individuals don't succeed, and at least it's less regretted because they didn't have to conform to what other people expected to be. Go, Young.
Yeah, the problem is that the assumption is that the minority on your side is going to always be able to exercise their identity. But the fact is not a world where everybody gets to do that freely. How do you change that then?
Yes, we agree. Exactly. Like a Chinese person is hard to hide their accent, and Indian is very hard to hide their complexion, which is why exactly that it requires the state to protect their identity. That was exactly the argument from Lily. Maybe she's a new and just ignore her. So the argument was about from the second class, this movement to the second class, to the justice for individual capacity to opt in is really conditional on your ability. For example, your finance, your resources, your assets, how much you know, and then like how long you stay in the country. Right? As long as there is a difference between individuals, there will be some people more successful in opting in, and some people less able to opt in. So the people who succeed in opting in is gonna come back to say, hey, I made it. You didn't do it, so it must be your fault. Like they rally along with the rest of society because they are now safe. Now the successful story is now being used against those other minorities who are not able to opt in. It also means that even for the people who succeeded, the sacrifice they had to make in over this whole time is against their culture, their identity, their upbringing. They have to denounce their own heritage in order to get where they are. The reward and sacrifice ratio is simply unjust. So even if you have the most successful case in the world, the damage to their individual dignity is unconscionable. So the conclusion of the second class is simple. Individuals are vulnerable and they cannot be helped. It's only the state who has more resources to help in them rather than transferring those burdens onto those individuals. This is the most just way of helping minorities, not asking the minority to fend for themselves. The last thing we're going to talk about, how do we change the system more effectively? Look, the problem on their side of the house, they simply just say, we have a chance to succeed, so we should just continue the way that we are. But the problem is, the reason why we're at where we are right now is largely based on the conglomeration of companies and monopolistic interests. All of these are likely going to shift very quickly. And when we do not shift really quickly, that means that we are all going to go down quickly. It's only when we allow innovation, when we allow different ideas to flow, when we allow companies to be challenged by smaller companies, and we fund those companies to challenge those ideas. When we allow transition from STEM to literature, for example, we're not just focusing on engineering students because we realize that even with AI, you still need people to use AI. You need people who study literature to use those AI. Under their side of the house, because you think STEM is always the best, you're not able to make that transition, and the system where the existing parties and elitist government is able to perpetuate infinitely, it's not likely going to be challenged, and all the systematic harm will forever continue. Post.
A personal explain as to why the majority standard that people ought to fit in will be easily enough and more inclusive on their outside so that people can access happiness better. And I think this unlocks open governance benefits because open governance benefits in order for their benefits to accrue. Solely, I think the standard by which people always in order to fit into that standard should be reasonable enough, that standard should be good enough, and so that people can actually have the capacity to even fit in. The first reason here is that I think fitting in here, I think if you actually just read the info study carefully, it actually validates the modesty and mediocreness. Because just doing a stable job, live like what other people do, there is no need for you to be special. And that's why I think there are thresholds for you to actually be fitting into a good and happy life. And in of itself, it's not really that high. You have to compare that to their mental health. Because I think already there are other economist narratives like hyper-competitive capitalism that pushes people to always be better, always push harder, always be paranoid about what I can do better, and always be paranoid that I might lose out in a competition. The reason why this is very bad is because of two reasons. The first is because obviously competition is zero sum. When somebody wins a competition, somebody else would lose that particular competition. And that way, I think always the happiness and the fulfillment of somebody is actually at the expense of other people's speculation and very devastation. The second thing is oftentimes this is very inaccessible and disproportionately like your ability that was disproportionately distributed. Because for example, when you're born in a privileged background and therefore be able to get better education and therefore have better networking with other like successful people, that's the moment when you have significant head start in comparison to vast majority of people who are just in the middle path. And that's why I think are much larger in scale in comparison to open competition back. Because they might talk about things so big like minorities. We are talking vast majority of people, vast majority of like middle class people who always have to be lifting something, who always have to feel a sense of massive deprivation, paranoid that I should always need more. And that way, our talk this particular notion and narrative is counterbalancing capital mechanism that actually counterbalances capitalistic narrative. The second thing is, this is exactly the reason that's why the standard of mediocreness should always be excellent enough. Because I think more analytical entails normativity and desirability that you ought to be saying is you should be able to actually pursue this particular lifestyle. Not saying, for example, becoming CEO, having your own house and 2 cars and getting a better university and even good looking. I think all those standards are very, very unlikely to become a part of this particular standard in the end of the day. That's why I think a very useful standard that it doesn't really you just need to be like, for example, a normal salary and that you can somehow some degree of money to have a lease. It's okay for you to have some degree of debt. All those type of things are going to be the reasonable standard for you to be actually getting into fitting in. And that because, for example, when those type of like very unstable standards are there, totally there's going to be a massive societal backlash, massive robust discussion upon as to why this is an unreasonable standard that people would not be able to obtain. The last thing to talk about is the old idea that this is standardized. For example, and that's the reason why there is people should always like fit into certain only one type of like lifestyle in the end of the day. I believe that there is going to be some degree of flexibility, some degree of choice that people can actually make. For example, you can still be a salaryman, you can still open a mom and pop shop and whatnot. This is because of 2 reasons. First, it's obviously because of over competition. That's why I think people would have natural incentive to deviate in that over competition and make sure that they actually tap into different job market in the end of the day. Only a small shop, peanuts salaryman, and so we're doing just a manual labor. There are many different types of things that we can do, and that way there's a natural incentive for people to be distributed. But secondly, obviously there's a societal incentive because like the society just wants to allocate human resources better, and that's why there's a negative lever for your cost like and humanity savings and other things like that. The second thing that I'm going to talk as to why the society overall becomes more amenable to the social minorities. Only competition will give the minorities will be able to fully execute and exercise their identity. But I think it's very, very uncomparative because if they really want to assume that people are actually going to listen to what the minorities say, then probably I think people will not have mechanism also fight on their art at house. However, I think we need to be comparative enough to what extent people are actually going to listen to the minorities when they're set up, for example, when they say that we as minorities want unique benefits, unique rights for themselves in comparison to people in general, for example, including the minorities, actually wanting to say that I want this particular thing. ability to actually able to fit into the majority standard. I also want stable jobs. I also want my house or a car. Only governance mechanism here is insufficient because they rely on, for example, minorities themselves desiring this, minorities themselves actually encouraging these particular career paths. But I think the more important delta is the people who actually do have authority, people in the privileged, people in the majority and mainstream standard. We are going to explain as to why these specific majority people are unnecessarily going to be more able to listen to these people. This is because of two reasons. The first is that I think there is much more pressure on them because this is a norm, because this is something that people ought to be able to achieve. But the very fact that these people are disproportionately unable to achieve this, it indicates that there is a stable structural problem. Opening opposition simply say that, oh, like it's going to be your fault and people are going to blame shift you. I think it's only for two reasons. The first thing is, I think there are social evidence to show that, for example, like black people are disproportionately unable to get into the university education and stuff like that. You can use that. But secondly, your mechanism is also saying that labor union demanding for more. Feminism also demanding for more. Then following under your set of cause, if you're unable to achieve your cause, the same degree of mainstreaming mechanism is also going to play under your set of cause. But with that, if you want to argue that your mechanism works, our mechanism will also equally work that we are going to pressure these people in a better way. The second thing is, I think there is much more degree of participation, much more degree of empathy. This is the most important thing. I think there is much more common ground of understanding of the art of the heart. Because people share the same people, actually you celebrate that. I also want mediocre life. I also want mediocre success. That's why I think there's more group of sympathy. Even if you are from different backgrounds, you now see these people as somebody who are actually sharing a lot of time, some degree of commonality. But after their so when those other minorities just randomly coming on and saying that I want this right and that right, I don't really have any direct experience of fun, people wouldn't really have the incentive or the capacity to even have some degree of affection and connection to these people. And that's the reason why the degree to which these people are incentivized and how they get happy to actually empathize and agree with these individuals from not agree with the degree to their house. Why is this more beneficial on the art at the house? The first thing is because I think there is a trade-off on the art at the house between majority and minority. Because if you want a special care for minorities, solely I think the research is zero sum. But whereas when we are actually enacting certain policies that actually benefit the majority, that also trickles down to the minority as well. Because if you want to people know, if you want a better access to education, that particular universal policy will apply to minorities as well. But even within the minorities, under their threshold, is different minority demand for different rights. Probably there is a competition between minorities. And that's why I think it's very unlikely that minorities within the minorities have even access to rights for as much argument. Every single minority can actually get access to, and that's why under our circles, we don't have that access to this for minorities as well.
Building option extension is simple. We think no one has examined who creates the norms that people fit in and for what interest. I think closing option claims that it's going to be about modesty and it's going to be nice. It's just an assertion, and we think it's an understatement. If it's a norm that if people aspire to get success, that to be general and okay, we think it's likely to be associated to a victor's narrative. It's a narrative that if you respect me, you will be able to fit in. If you go on to the drinking session, you will be able to fit in. In the seniorities organization, the narratives that are able to shape the way of what constitutes fitting in, I think that there's no room to believe that just being nice is going to be the way that the narrative is going to be constituted. I have two extensions. Firstly, who creates the narrative and why even the majority have a hard time fitting into it in an entirely sense. Secondly, on a bit of how not fitting in achieves changes, because I think overall collectivization is insufficient. I'll give you more factual contextualization of why it might happen and has been happening. Before that, a couple of independent rebuttals. So they said that, clothing garment said that minorities are okay because, if we have this narrative, they will be listened because, if they're not fitting in, there's probably some problem. So, we'll be able to identify the problem. I don't get this because that's just saying if they're suffering, we're able to identify the problem. That's just natural sympathy and kind of a human rights kind of thing that people are agreeing with the cause. That's nothing to do with fitting in. That's like saying fitting in is making these minorities suffer, and now we're further visualizing this issue of minorities, and that's why we're able to recognize it. So it's just fitting in is further
marginalizing them. It's another factor of sympathy and recognition of the vulnerability of the individuals, which is completely different from the narrative that is constituting the assistance and momentum for minority alleviation. That's why all their narratives are simply wrong, but rather they're conceding to the fact that the fitting in is oppressing them and further visualizing them, visualizing their suffering. Also, we think it's untrue because the narrative is for the majority, meaning that for the majority, it seems natural that people can fit in. It seems wrong that people are not able to fit in, and it's at least odd. Things that are odd are likely to be despised or distanced. And because of my majority's visceral feeling, I wasn't sure why they think that, well, if we have this narrative, it's going to be modest and it's going to be okay, a reasonable claim. But let's go on to our extension. So there's a couple of reasons to believe that the narrative is going to be a victor's narrative, or at least not something that fits even for the majority. So firstly, again, this narrative is associated to what constitutes an ordinary okay person and is likely to lead to success. It is something that people aspire to because they want that stable, ordinary life, and is likely to be leaning towards something that they visioned and aspire to be good. To the extent that it aspires to be, meritocratic improvement kind of nuance, and because people want to aspire to be better, okay, stable, and be in a good position, the narratives are associated to visions of more successful people, modest, responsible people, kind of people with good posture, the color of their skin, their housing, their belonging, all these sort of things are likely to be leaning towards the victors because that's what people want, and inevitably victors are able to shape narratives in their convenient way. So when closing government says that it's capitalism issues, we argue that it's capitalism that is co-opting the fittingness, because capitalism is able to say that for you to be able to succeed, you need to fit in. For you to be able to go on in a decent life, you have to fit in and become the majority. We think that we wasn't simply unsure how this fittingness would be a counter narrative, but rather because it pursues you to be okay, be stable, and be part of the majority. It's easily co-opted by capitalism to make people feel that meritocracy is a necessary thing, and we once again this is an important rebuttal. But furthermore, irrespective of general narrative, we think organizations fitting in get exploited. Again, I'm talking about senior people being able to form the atmosphere in the organizations in ways that make them appease or toxic cultures. It might be drinking sessions, it might be sexualizing women, it might be just silencing your subordinates, but these things can be forced because it forces you to fit in, and that is justified. That is clearly in favor of people in power and people who appease minorities and further strengthen things like the glass ceiling. And that obviously means that people who do not fit in are not able to appease the senior people, and those in power are simply blocked. But furthermore, the third important thing is that there's too many categories of things to fit in. It might be your salary, it might be a job, it might be your housing, it might be your posture, it might be a color of things. Actually, if you find out, it's very hard to fit in all these categories. And every category you don't fit in, you might be stigmatized, you might feel miserable. The point is that you don't know what other people feel, but you have a fear that if you don't fit in, you might feel miserable, you might be otherized, you might not be called to the next important session. And why? It's an internal constraint. It is an internal silencing which has no understanding of when we have to end. That is why, particularly on an individual level, many people dropped out. Many people cause excessive self-restraint because they don't know the appropriate end for them to kill their individuality and feel like they are part of the majority and feel okay at the expense of what they truly matter, or outside of what their majority sentiment could be. Hopefully.
If so much people drop out, is that the type of norm here is likely to exist in our country?
So that's the point. Because if people want to be successful, people cling on trying to being fit in, people are feeling suffocating, but are still have to fit in because they feel that's the only way to go on with it. If they don't agree with it, they might fail and they don't know how to go out of it. That's why I'm talking about the co-opting by capitalism. That's why I'm talking about people who want to succeed, they'll say collectively opt into these structures, because being in the majority, being the right person seems reasonable and it's hard to refute. And also it's easy for other people to recommend others. It's good for you to try to fit in the majority. And why is that, rightful recommendation that creates this toxic culture of suffocation and denial. Many people can't even opt in. People with ADHD or neurodivergent people, or generally people not many people succeed with job, succeed with their career. Many people simply don't fit in, and that's why people are made miserable and sacrifice their individuality. How do we change on our side? I think there's important trends that are already existing. The rise of Gen Z means that there's more diverse actors being accepted. The rise of inclusivity education in workplaces, like the emphasis on things like workplace comfort and safety. These things, we argue, only existed because people are no longer fitting in, and the recognition has happened that corporations want to attract these people, and that trend does exist. That trend will stop if we continue to fit in. As we show ourselves that we exist, that's when society has changed, and we want that to continue. We oppose.
Absent the norm that says that fitting in is good, obviously there will still be some incentive for individuals to want to fit in, given the fact that if they fit in, they're able to access job opportunity, they're able to access income and all these sorts of things. And I think that if offense doesn't seem to be the case, but I'm unsure about the extent to which individuals are able to meaningfully exercise their autonomy on that side of the bench. I don't think they are able to prove that point. Two things I'll do within speech. First, I'll explain why the standard is likely to be good, and with that, and the second, I'll explain why we get better structural. Firstly, on why we think that this standard is likely to be good. So, status quo is not a world in which everyone feels good by simply being yourself, which is the assertion from opening opposition. Because status quo is a world where factors like capitalism, rat race, or things like hedonic treadmill compel people to compete against each other, and in fact be better than vast majority of individuals. That is why in countries like South Korea or even in Japan, being a doctor or a lawyer is seen as prestigious precisely because those jobs grant you things like more income than vast majority of individuals, even if only a tiny portion of the population are able to access those positions as conceded by offense. So that is the counterfactual that we identified to North Quantum closing opposition. On our side of the bench, when the standard is being majority is okay, being average is okay, that means that the average salary man is also something that people are likely to see. Next bit, and the importance of this material then is one, it's the next side opening opposition process on minority feeling back, because on that side, minorities feel that because they are unable to spell the majority on their end as well. On our side, and what secondly, this enormously hard because that is a world where not only minorities feel isolated, but vast majority of middle class people live an unfulfilling life on that side of the bench. Closing opposition tries to trivialize this extension by saying that we're only talking about being nice, but that's clearly was not the extension from common speech because it explains that, for instance, earning average income and all these sorts of things are okay. Then additionally, I would say it's status quo bias because status quo is the world in which seniors can enforce unreasonable standards, and those things are not sufficiently counterbalanced. The first thing I want to note as to why our time is better than is as per the imposed by the suggestion is that fitting in suggests being average and being the normal and being like typical lifestyle is okay. So by definition, I would suggest that our extension still stands. But secondly, we give the ability to push back on average individuals against those failures to enforce unreasonable standards. But if majority cannot fulfill the standards enforced by being or whatever, then they can say that this expectation is unreasonable. This standard or lifestyle that is being promoted does not resonate with the majority, so therefore it is not virtuous or whatever. Those are the ways in which we allow people to push back. On that side of the bench, those unreasonable standards are glorified further, precisely because of the capitalist norm that closing opposition agrees to make this message being on both that bench. That is why this extension stands. Then already wins the debate because it flips the offense strength as well as explain the prerequisite of OG as to why the average lifestyle is something that is not ineffective. But more importantly, the more important extension from common speech is that we allow individuals to demand reforms a lot better. And I want to note that opening government frame here that fitting in gives you benefits and now people can access external help like scholarship. The problem is people who need scholars already have incentives to demand them, and if opening government is correct that complying with the majoritarian culture unlocks all those benefits, then probably those demands are symmetric. And I would note that then that argument from OG is one of the offense challenge that will, even if people demand or even people want to fit in, some people are structurally unable to do that. Someone then explains the logically prior argument as to why this norm is a tipping point by which we force the majority to craft the society in a way that is more available to allow more people to fit in. And I want to note that the importance of this material. One, it is more specific to how the norm operates in comparison to opening governments generic argument about rich people having incentives to pursue innovation anyway, which is, by the way, unproven. But secondly, if the largest delta, the class, the distinguished individuals having wanted to fit in on average set of benefits sort of money or whatnot, the point where the norm exerts the most pressure that would be absent in the counterfactual is the average individual for society at large. So finally, wants to all claim that fitting in is hard by proof the congress that we allow that to happen in the percentage as well. So, what are the challenges to this? Opening office strength, some that closing office strength, all like that, all of that. If you fail to fit in, it becomes individual fault and individual underground or waste. The first thing is, this is untrue, because you can say things like how lack of access to basic education precluded certain communities from accessing university. Look at the fact that many structural reform demands were based on claims by individuals to allow them to fit in, and that's the claim that we empower market French. Secondly, even if individuals are named, which is the worst possible case that offense pushes on us, that is unimportant. Because if someone is unsuccessful and the status quo, society is unsuccessful and their lack of ability to reform structure, on our side of the bench, society feels like they are failing to uphold the norm. So it doesn't matter if the blame is on individual or society. The solution to solving people not being able to access to average lifestyle is always involving some degree of structural requirement to which we empower. So yes, majority may not be able to understand why minorities not fit in. That doesn't matter, our attention still then. Final thing that we want to go about commonality, which is the premise to which individuals feel the need of others on our side. People share similar goals, people want similar lifestyle. That is the ground on which we allow individuals to demand requirements. Hopefully.
So it seems like you try to dodge the burden by saying you don't really require that much, but you can get this massive expansion allowing society to be so fit, so accommodating to minorities. You can't have both ways.
No, we can't have both because the average lifestyle is something that is accessible, and those people are unable to access to those benefits are able to access that because we demand society. I'm pretty sure because nobody nuances why this people won't believe to do that. Alright, finally then I'm closing off this last challenge which is on social trend. Firstly, they assert that there is some inclusive social trend without explaining why or what exists there. But secondly, I would say that if it is true that social trend exists for institutions to be more inclusive, that suggests that on our side of the country, standards is likely to be accessible, which is why this if you believe in their best days are essentially so high. The final thing I want to respond to is from opening up issues that majority culture is not the same. One, this is absurd. It's not like after one day the entire industry is going to be automated. I don't think they proved by this unsafety is likely to eventually that quickly. But secondly, majority lifestyle is unlikely to be overly specific because the definition of majority is like more than 50%. In most societies, not more than half the population has the exact same university degree with the exact same job. Likely people conform to general average lifestyle and be content with graduating from uni and having an average income for those reasons closing off.
Want to start in 3, 2, 1, 0. The first issue I want to talk about is the nature of this normal fitting in. Is it something inclusive or equitable, or is it likely to be invasive or stagnant? The way in which Xi Jinping does this debate is to say that it is going to be a reasonable narrative because this norm is about average mediocre life. That is a lie. Look at info styles. It says stability and conventionality. Therefore, our extension about questioning who is the one who are likely to form this norm, who is the one who, what is the ways in which this fitting culture norm is likely to operate in capitalistic society, was an important extension in this debate. The first response is that this is unlikely to be mediocre or average. The standard is likely to increase because there's things like sponsorship within media. There's likely to be capitalism who wants to exploit you, who wants to make you consume goods within capitalism, who want to force you to work under labor exploitation. All of this emotional exploitation is what capitalism wants to do. And if they can see that the existence of capitalistic society is true, all of this is likely to manifest itself within society. Also, you can see that there's things like accumulation of know-how, things like goods. That is precisely what capitalism is pushing in order to trap these people into the miserable situation in which they continuously feel inferior by comparing with this conventionality, which is actually difficult to achieve under their side of the house. The second level of response is they never engage with the people who actually have power in terms of feeling in culture. We told you the people who are in power, who are in authority, one heterosexual privileged individual who have been benefiting by this feeling in culture is likely to continuously perpetuate this norm. They never prove why all of a sudden this norm is likely to be reasonable for average individual on the ground. That's why it is likely to be problematic.
Right.
But lastly, even if we assume the people who form this narrative is a mediocre person who cannot always be average, why is it still likely to be helpful? Firstly, because they have incentive to confirm their bias, survivorship bias. They want to feel that the effort that they made has been justifiable. It is something that is worth it. That's why when they are able to achieve part of the conventionality, like being able to get home or being able to be family, you are likely to confirm and reinforce the narrative on the ground. They try to say that people are going to be equal and they are likely to paint average, but the likely scenario is people don't want to feel shame. They want to feel that they are good. That's why they are likely to spread their picture of home within social media, picture of your family within social media, which reinforces the narrative on the ground. So irrespective of who are the, even if we assume best case scenario, government scenario, irrespective of who forms the norm is likely to operate in a way that standard is increasing. Therefore, people are likely to feel a sense of inferiority on the ground. We talked about an important metric, important nuance in this debate. Conventionality is something that is multidimensional and multi-category. Things like job, relationship, body, beauty, materialism. You go to from school, from early stage, you go to university, you go to social paid job, you get good car or house, or you get to stable future income in terms of pension or future investment. That's the sort of average conventionality which is likely to be built. And achieving every single metric is something that is difficult, given the time constraint, given the limited resource, and vast majority of individuals are not born into vast privileged vast lottery where they can exercise and access to all of this life. And that's why our extension was important. We pointed out not just minority, not just average people. Every single individual is likely to struggle and likely to feel unhappy within their side of the house. The counter impact here is being mediocre is good. That's actually a tension. That's a neutral claim that they said. What we represented from closing government is when you continuously closing opposition is when you continuously compare with other people, when you continuously have certain metrics that you are not able to achieve, you are likely to feel a sense of inferiority. You are likely to be psychological because you can quantify that standard. You can quantify whether you are able to get home, whether you are able to get home, a family. And we think that every single individual is likely to feel miserable under this norm. Before moving on, opening.
So if the majority of the people are failing to achieve that standard, is that really true that those people who fail to achieve will be stigmatized inside the house?
It's not, we already told you the mechanistic reason why even people who are actually suffering from the norm is likely to confirm the norm. But furthermore, irrespective of stigma, it's the matter of how you perceive the stigma. You are likely to feel that you are inferior. You are likely to remember the negative complexity that you had since childhood, that you had been valued, for instance. You were not able to have good friends or family, for instance. That sort of negative trauma that you have been built since being pushed different conventionality or within the society is negatively likely to be irreversibly drained into your brain, which means that it's difficult to just say that it's not something that's not going to impact you. Next thing I want to look at is some argument that was left within government case. Closing government talk about things like pressure the government to improve the society in order to engage with open opposition. The first level of response is that it's dependent on them proving why the very actor is going to speak up and trying to change the beating culture. We think this is unlikely to be true. Firstly, because there are things like grand ceiling, you internalize the inferiority. You as minority feel that it's difficult to change the beating culture within society, which means that it's unlikely all of a sudden people will change their stance. But secondly, even some people have capacity and competency to overcome and to climb up the social ladder, they are unlikely to act in a meaningful way. Because they are likely to maneuver and work within the system, work within the corporate culture, instead of calling out the social injustice, they are likely to sign the limited slot of scholarship. They are likely to obey the harassment culture that may exist within the company. That's why it is unlikely the social changes are likely to happen because people tend to act selfishly and there's likely to be collective action rather than individuals about who make that decision. That's why social changes are likely to be true. The next response we hear from their side is that there's intersectionality with minority issues, therefore it's difficult to improve the situation on the opposition side. I don't think there's a zero-sum game within these thoughts. It's about respect and acceptance of diversity and acceptance of human life, which do not require material zero-sum game. So I'm not sure why also saying that this is likely to be the scenario. The next thing we hear is within counterfactual, we didn't build counterfactual. The first level of response is our extension is not independent of counterfactual. We thought to what this hardest fitting culture is invasive and hard is something that's harmful. But we also thought to within the light of political climate, within the light of criticism, there's things of a trend of acceptance precisely because there has been diverse people on the ground. So for these reasons, proud to oppose.